Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm Sean, the owner and lead tutor of Math Swap Tutoring. And today I want to talk about um, how I would approach becoming an engineer differently if I were to do it all over again. All right, so my background is electrical engineering. I got my bachelor's and my master's degrees in electrical and electronics engineering at Mercer University. And I worked as an electronics engineer for over 14 years. But there's some things I would do a little bit differently. So, first of all, and I want this to encourage those of you young people who are looking to become engineers and everything. Like, first of all, if you want to do that, do it. You can do it. Don't think that you can't, because a lot of times people think it would be too hard. But if you're ready to put in the work and whatnot, you can do it, period. You just can. So, definitely take can't out of your vocabulary. But first of all, when I went into the engineering field, as far as like my program of study, I did it because I had an interest in like audio stuff, like speakers and bass and stuff like that, stereo systems and stuff like that, sound. Like I had a real interest in that. And so that's what I went into it with with that type of mindset that I wanted to work in that type of stuff. But one thing I did is when I went into that area of study, I did not continue to explore that particular interest. So that's the first thing I would encourage you to do. If you're seeking to be an engineer, I want you to ask yourself, why do I want to be an engineer? What is it that I want to work on? Is it because I want to, a lot of people want to design video games, or a lot of people want to, I guess design smartphones or some of this latest snazzy technology and whatnot. And keep that alive, because the thing is, if you don't keep it alive, then you can end up getting pigeonholed in your career. And that's somewhat kind of like what happened to me. I definitely like appreciate a lot of stuff I was able to learn in the area I went into, which ended up being more so like aerospace, government kind of stuff. I appreciate that, but I ended up working for companies that weren't necessarily the companies that I had in mind. I ended up going with what was available in my area. Okay. So that's really like the first thing that I would really encourage, like keep that alive. Two is just kind of like having an understanding where you want your career to go overall. One thing that what I mean is these days we are encouraged to change a lot. You get into a particular area, stay there about 2 or 3 years, and then move on. So you can learn new skills and go on to the next thing. And that's good. But then at the same time, I would say don't always go into something, a job or whatever, just seeking what you can just get before you move on quickly. Again, that might be countercultural a little bit, so like, just listen to it and hear what I'm saying. The thing is, a lot of times if you go into a job and you're more so thinking about yourself, then what happens is you will go in and, you had a potential of not necessarily giving everything. And I think that you even might close yourself up to like really developing expertise. Now, of course, I have to be careful with saying that because, for example, in my particular jobs, I had two different engineering jobs. The first one I was doing that for just over 3 years, and the next one I was doing that for like, about 11 years. And I learned a lot, especially with the job I was in for like 11 years. But the thing is, just like my first project manager said, he said, Sean, it'll probably be about 3 years before you start to learn something. About 3 years before you start learning. So about 3 years in, you're really just getting started. And I know, especially for, young people, it's kind of hard for you to think that far ahead. Like, man, that's a long time. But it really isn't. Especially if you really, really kind of put your mind and your heart into what you're doing. So that's one thing I do appreciate about my experience. Now, the first place I did end up leaving because as a young engineer, that was my first job. And like all that I was doing was writing documents. That's all I was doing. And so I was getting really, really disillusioned. I think the thing is, the team that I was on, it was kind of hard for them to integrate me because the phase of the project that my team was working on was a certain phase where everybody was actively working and actively engaged, and it was kind of hard for them to think about integrating this young engineer into what they were doing. And so I'd ask and ask and ask and ask and ask and ask, and it taught me to advocate for myself. But then at the same time, I was getting disillusioned because I was given textbooks to read and documents to write, and I was like, Lord, I did not sign up for this. So me changing over to a different job allowed me to go ahead and actually do some more engineering type of stuff. So, but again, the main point I want to make with that is don't be afraid to kind of like really learn somewhere. Invest yourself in wherever you go, even if you do know that that's not necessarily the permanent place for you. Don't necessarily go into something already just kind of like planning to leave, because it means that you'll be less invested. Okay. So, and I did okay with that, with my jobs and whatnot, but, that's just something that I just wanted to say in general. But the main thing I would keep in mind for myself is that I would go into a job and I would be more selective. I probably would be more willing to move to where my interest was, because I'm kind of like the type of person who doesn't necessarily care to do a whole lot of traveling. But if I need to travel to pursue whatever area I need to go into, then I would probably in retrospect be more likely to do that. Because the thing is, what'll end up happening if you don't go into it and you don't explore your initial interest, then you always kind of be like, I wonder what would have happened if I had actually done that. And then you'll end up kind of feeling like, well, I picked the wrong reason to become an engineer. I should have never become an engineer, and that may not necessarily be the right thing. Thirdly and lastly, I'll say also understand the potential for your interests to change. Now, don't go into it necessarily thinking about your interests changing, but when I first decided I wanted to be an engineer, I was very young. I was like 12. I was a sixth grader. And so, life changes, you change, you grow and whatnot. And your interests may change. The world changes, technology changes. And one thing I found for me is, while I can code, while I have coded, coding is not necessarily something that I'm the most fond of. However, I will say that I still do plan on using my engineering knowledge and expertise to go into the area that I want to go into. But sometimes whenever you get experience in something, it helps you to kind of understand what you like and what you don't like. So be open to that growth inside of yourself, and to understanding, getting a better idea of who you really are and what you really want to pursue, because that's just natural. That's kind of like what happens. But again, that happens with spending time. I've been at this stuff for like over 14 years, plus all of my years in school. So you kind of have to live a little bit to kind of like be able to see that. Okay. So hopefully something I've said helps you. Go for engineering. If you believe that's what you want to do, go for it, because you have to enter into some sort of something and go into it. Pursue whatever it is that you want it to pursue. Pursue it, and don't let anybody tell you to settle for anything. Okay? Hopefully this helps you guys. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Make sure you share this with your friends who want to be engineers as well. Feel free to leave comments and ask questions and things like that too, because I love to actually hear from you. Okay?